in the invite, the email, the credentials, that 302 number is the Christian Unity Group. Just a word of Matt joined the wrong meeting for 30 seconds.
Also, in the email that went out, that was not an active link. It had to be, you had to click on it and copy it in because it didn't just click and go.
That's what mine went directly in.
Mine didn't, I don't know.
In the
I see
email.
some odd things between Outlook and Mac once in a while, so.
Okay.
But I'm not changing, so.
Well, I'm using a Mac and it all went well
Okay.
tonight, which I'm thankful for because I've had a lot of stuff up in the air. I'm going to, let's see here. We've got Roger, we've got Aria, we've got everybody. All right. Is that accurate? We've got everybody here?
And we are live.
All right.
Danny.
Yeah, I don't see Danny.
Yeah, we're missing Danny Knapp.
Okay. All right. I have 7:04. I have somebody texting me. It's not Danny. I'm going to get us started at 7:05, which is right now. And so if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please mute yourself. I will stay live and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance to our Republic here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for joining us. If you are joining us live or if you're watching this later, we do post these up on YouTube. I am going to ask Mr. Lanzer if he will do a poll for quorum.
Sure. Mr. Betcher,
Present.
Ms. Cheney,
Present.
Mr. Knipp, Mr. Marks,
Here.
Mr. Priednoff,
Here.
Mr. Van Harn. Mr. Van Harn.
You're
I
muted.
can't hear you, but I can see you.
Okay.
Mr. Van Harn's here.
He's waving.
So all
Yes.
members are present except for Mr. Knipp.
All right. Do I have a motion to excuse Mr. Knipp?
So
Did he
motion.
contact us to say he wasn't going to be here?
I did not hear anything from him.
No.
There's been a first. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
What, there was a second? Is that a yes?
Yes, I have Mr. Betcher as the second.
Okay. All those in favor of excusing Mr. Knipp?
Aye.
Aye.
Unmute and say aye. All right.
Aye.
In the,
Can you hear me now?
yes,
Yes.
in
Okay.
the
All right.
absence of an objection, I will take that as unanimous. And let everybody know that I do not have anyone who's registered to speak to council tonight. If anyone joining us would like to speak, please, if you're joining us by Zoom, there's an option for you to get into the chat box and please just leave a message there that you'd like to speak. And we'll ask Mr. Lanzer to kind of track that. And I'll ask at the end of the meeting if there are any comments there, anyone that would like to speak. If you're joining us by phone, I will just ask at the end of the meeting if anyone would like to speak at that time. With that, I will go on into the mayor's report that I have prepared. I've been doing a COVID-19 update. What's that?
Do we need to set the agenda?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I did not see that on my agenda. I'm sorry that is what we should be doing right now. So Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the council meeting agenda, and do I have a motion to accept it as
Motion
is?
to
or with
accept.
amendments? All right,
I'll
is there a
second.
second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Without objection, I will take that as unanimous. And on that agenda, the next item here is the mayor's report. So I've been doing a COVID-19 update, going over the numbers. I have late in the day today, I sent a couple requests to our administrator to be able to screen share some things with you guys. When I get there, I'll ask if that's available to do. Over the, first off, in terms of numbers, over the last 10 years, there's been an average of 61,000 people who die per year of the flu. And we're currently, when I looked at this, and this was last week, we were at 76,000, and we're halfway through the year here. So that gives a sense of where we are nationally in terms of what this looks like. That if it stays on that course, there'll be twice as many as typically die of the flu. We have a Hamilton County Health Board is now publishing information per zip code about how many cases we're seeing. And Mr. Hirth, do you have that available for a screen share?
I do. Hang on just a sec.
Nope, not that one. Sorry.
Do you want
One
the other
before.
one?
The other one. Yes, I do want this one, but
The counties, the one with the counties on it? Or
yes.
the village? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
municipalities.
Hang on.
I guess I could have talked about that one because that was next on my list. Okay, so what we see here is Hamilton County, and you've got a heat map. The darker the area, the more cases, and you can see the cases there down in the legend at the bottom. And if you're looking at Gulf Manor, we are in that mid-range, looks like in terms of the color coding there, at about 15 to 27 cases in the area. This map is helpful in terms of seeing where the most cases are showing up, the darker areas. One way of looking at this too is the likelihood of contagion. Of course, if you're taking the precautions that are recommended, you hopefully can stave that off a bit. But generally speaking, the darker the area, the more likely, all else being equal, the more contagious that area is. And so you see Silverton is the municipality that gets that branding here next to us. Of course, it's without zooming in, and again, this is by zip code, so it's not perfect. There's a lot of bleeding of the edges here that there maybe parts of Amberley Village in there, parts of Norwood.
Stefan,
Yes.
Stefan, the reason that's so dark is that includes Pleasant Ridge and Kennedy Heights, and there are two large nursing homes
Right.
in those areas, so the numbers are skewed in those two because of the nursing homes.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Thank you. The another way in which this map is misleading is Cincinnati reports their numbers separately from they have their own public health board, and they report their numbers differently, and those are not integrated into this map. All right, so the city of Cincinnati isn't accurately represented in this map. And of course, they would also, if they were showing their numbers, they have a lot of hospitals in the municipality of Cincinnati as well. There are 27 cases per day, which are, and you can drop that screen share now. There are about 27 cases per day that are requiring testing here in Hamilton County. And then that balloons once they make the phone call. So like if they test someone and that person is positive, their procedure is that they'll do a phone call. Then they'll ask the person, who have you been in contact with in the last certain number of days? And then they'll try to get a hold of each one of those persons by phone and, you know, ask them to stay at home for 14 days. So that's part of the workload that's going on at the health board. And they do have, you know, they have translators and everything working on that. The numbers that I've been looking at and reporting on have been the total hospitalizations and deaths. If you recall, part of the early concern was about our hospitals reaching capacity. And Ron, if you can bring up the other screen share that I prepared. So with the total hospitalizations and the total deaths, we get a report on this. It used to be every day except for Saturday and Sunday, we would get a report on it. They recently have moved to 3 times a week rather than 5 times a week. But these are the totals. The blue is hospitalizations in Hamilton County. Again, this does not include Cincinnati, the city of Cincinnati. And then the red are the folks who unfortunately have passed away with the virus. So our latest numbers are just over 100. I think it's at 105 as of today that have passed away. And then we're at approximately 350 in terms of the folks that have been hospitalized. This chart has its flaws as well. And one of those is that it's very difficult to have a unified, each hospital, each healthcare facility has a different administrator that's interpreting what's required of them in terms of reporting. And so that can cause some difficulties with understanding. For instance, with hospitalizations, there have been some people that have been released, and yet we see the number continuing to go up. And it's hard to tell, does this represent the total number of people that have ever been hospitalized, which is the way I'm interpreting it, versus is this the current number of folks that have been hospitalized, that are currently hospitalized in Hamilton County. We have, on that note, we have been told that the Duke Energy Alternative Care site, which I've spoken of before, which is the overflow site, if we, you know, given the concern that early on that we may go over our capacity, where would people be housed at? They're looking at doing the Duke Energy Center. That has been demobilized, so that should indicate that there's less of a concern with the capacity. As I'm sure you've heard in the news, there's concerns of a second wave. So that remains to be a concern. The belief, and you can remove that screen share. I've mentioned before that the governor's office is using the Cleveland Clinic as well as Ohio State for all of its modeling on what expectations are. And we're expecting that there will be about 22,000 tests being required by the end of May here. The message from the governor's office is concerning all this is the following. Members of the public must continue to social distance, limit non-essential travel, stay home if systematic, and we should highly encourage everyone to wear face coverings when visiting businesses. COVID-19 will continue to be a threat throughout 2020 until the development of a vaccine. On that note, there are business requirements for reopening that have been published in PDF format. There's a different one for each different type of business. I'm working on creating a contact list for all the businesses in the village to push out that information. We've been doing good about getting that information as we get it up on the website. But if you have business contact information, please forward it to me or Mr. Hirth, our village administrator. There's a lot of benefit to having a comprehensive list of all the folks. I would say that even includes folks that are self-employed in the village. That we want to make sure that very least that we're getting information out to them about requirements for reopening. The dates for allowable reopening have been published. May 15th, you may be aware, is for restaurants for outdoor seating, restaurants and bars. You have May 21st for inside dining. The requirements include making arrangements for social distancing, of course, and having employees wear masks, but the specifics are all in those PDFs in terms of the other openings like hair salons and day spas and even some of the health care places like for acupuncture and massage therapy, cosmetic therapy. These other, there have been a number of healthcare clinics that are now allowed to open that previously weren't allowed to. So there are a lot of differences in what's and what the requirements are. And as I said, we have PDFs on all that. If you are interested, contact me or Mr. Hirth, and we can, about a particular business, and we can get you those requirements. We would like to reach out personally to each of our area businesses, of course, to help them with that transition. I'm going to speak a little bit about additional resources. I wanted to make a comment because over the past several council meetings, I've listed news and resources for low-income individuals in the area. The reason I do this is that though perhaps not represented well on council, our village has a lot of folks that fall below the federal poverty level, and about a third of our families here in Gulf Manor qualify under the Ohio Expanded Medicaid. One statistic I want to mention is that nationally, which this is all attributed to COVID-19, the unemployment and everything that's been related to that. Food insecurity is up 260% over 2018 numbers. So that's more than doubled. The number of families nationally that are dealing with having trouble getting food on the table. If anyone in this, so I've been listing a lot of these resources, and I'm not going to go over them again, other than to say, if anyone in the village is struggling with basic food needs or struggling to connect to resources, please direct them to me so we can help get them reconnected. We've partnered with area nonprofits. We're well positioned to help people navigate that process, which can sometimes be very frustrating for folks, particularly in these times. Let's see. One of the resource changes I wanted to mention is that the Metro bus routes numbers 16, 32, 43, and 51 have joined those that are returning to full service. Also of significance, earlier in the month, it was announced that you could be put on a waiting list. Basically, if you're self-employed or if you're an independent contractor, you can now apply for unemployment. This was part of the Federal CARES Act back in April, but it is just now coming online in Ohio. Literally yesterday is when it came online in Ohio. So you are allowed to file claims that are backdated to the original stay-at-home order, which was, anybody know the date of that? Was it March? End of March.
I think it was March 16th, Stefan.
March 16th. All right. So you can file claims going back to March 16th for loss of income. All right. Initially my report was going to be you could get on a waiting list where they would, like, you could sign up, you could pre-register so that they would actually send you an email when the portal was ready, because that's what they had done over the past 2 weeks. But just yesterday, they announced you can just directly register now. So that's great news. We have a lot of self-employed people in the village. The other thing I want to talk about is the Small Business Association loans that are available under the Federal CARES Act grant. We've mentioned this in the past. I received a lot more information about this last Friday that I want to pass along to folks. So initially, I know a lot of people were looking at this like, I don't need another loan. I'm, in a position where it's going to be really hard to pay that back. What they're saying is that these are forgivable loans, all right? And there's some requirements that they have attached to the loan. But if you meet these requirements, they're telling you up front that it's going to be forgivable. You're not going to have to repay this money. So essentially it's a grant that's been pushed through this particular channel, all right? So those requirements are, one, you have to show that you have created or maintained at least one job, all right, with this money that they're giving you. You have to be, your company has to be making $1 million or less in order to be eligible for this money. And you have to show a 50% or more decrease in your revenue since the stay home order that's been due to the COVID-19. All right. Jeff Aludo, who's who was the person speaking on this, said that the CARES Act funding for this, the way that this is being administered through Hamilton County, they really want to encourage people, small business folks who are struggling to pursue this. And if they have any questions, to ask about it, and if you need information on that. So these forgivable loans are up to $10,000. All right, and let's see.
Mr. Mayor, what loan program are you talking about? Because if this is the Paycheck Protection Program, these numbers are not correct.
It's not the Paycheck Protection Program. It was presented to me as speak to what your understanding of what's incorrect about it, if you would, and that might help me understand what loan we're talking about.
Well, so the Paycheck Protection Program is 2.5 months of payroll expenses for a business, but there's a lot more intricacies that go into it that I'm not prepared to give official advice on.
Okay, no, yeah.
So I would
My understanding of that is a different loan that's available to small businesses, because that's not, the requirement for that isn't, do they cap that at 1 million in revenue? Like in terms of you're not eligible for it if your company makes over $1 million?
No, it's for companies that
Yeah.
the loan
Mr.
amounts
Mayor?
are up to 10 million.
The first wave, at
Yes.
least my understanding of the PPP, was first based on the government's definition of small business, which is any employer under 500 employees. So that was the first wave, and that was their definition. It always has been of a small business. The one you're talking about,
I'm sorry,
Is a
I couldn't
newly
hear you.
created
There was
one.
some background noise, Roger. Could you?
yeah,
So
sorry,
there was some,
I'll try to get,
background noise.
I think I'm
couldn't-
using my, okay. My understanding, I think, is that the PPP program was initially based on the government's definition of a small business, which is any employer that has less than 500 employees or less. Those were considered by the government small businesses, and it's always been that way. That was nothing new. So the one that Matt, I think, was referring to,
PPP
that's
program?
was their initial definition and whatever else. And I'm sorry?
I
Somebody
wasn't
asked
sure
a
what
question.
you were referring to. You
So-
said
sorry.
the PPP.
Yeah, the one that Matt's referring to was the
Oh,
PPP
if I
can,
program. And that,
I would just. I would just
Yes,
caution
Mr.
us
Solicitor.
can't
that
hear him.
we're broadcasting. I would caution us that we're broadcasting qualifications for federal loan programs or county loan programs. And I think the message we want to give to people is there's opportunities out there, but we don't want to be telling people what the specifics are, that someone listening to this broadcast says, well, I don't qualify because Gulf Manor told me I would not. There's small businesses, there's opportunities
Yeah,
in the county,
absolutely.
which I think you're talking about, Mayor. And there's opportunities
Yeah.
through local banks with PPP, but the whole message to everybody is there's help. And get on the internet and find where your resource is for help.
Yeah, what I want to
I think
specifically.
we're getting way too deep in the
Thank
weeds
you.
on these things.
Yes,
We need to just.
Yes, let me
overview.
move on, please. Let me move on, please. So what I want to specifically message to our residents is that, to our small businesses in our community, is that if you're needing help navigating this, please contact us, because we can help point you to the folks locally that can answer your questions. All right. I'm not trying to answer anybody's questions right here, especially in the sense of saying that you're not eligible for something. I want to maximize the opportunity that you may realize that you're connected to something that can help your business here in Gulf Manor. And thank you for all the input on that. There's some additional announcements that I want to make before I move into some discussion topics. The first is that we have, I've been notified that we have some extra masks that are available. We are following in our village administrator, Mr. Hirth, will speak to what we're doing here in the municipal building. He's been reporting on that to help maintain the safety of our employees and the ongoing operations of the village. We have, I've been told that we have 3 extra masks. If any of you don't have a mask, we are directing that in compliance with the state requirements, that our employees who are dealing with residents are masked. And I'm going to be directing that just for the protection of our employees, as well as to show solidarity, that any council members coming into the building be wearing masks as well. Want to ensure that you all have masks. If you don't, let me know. We have some available to you, and we're getting more as well. So I don't want that to be a burden on folks. Wanted to also announce that due to a family emergency, Chief Campbell will not be here this evening, but Mr. Hirth will be. He has turned in his report, and Mr. Hirth will be able to speak to that. Also wanted to mention that former Mayor Alan Shapiro's mother has passed away. We didn't announce that at the previous council meeting. And I'm going to ask that Ms. Cheney, who has more of kind of the intimate details on that, speak to that at this time.
Okay, she passed away on May 1st. I have her obituary open. She was living in a nursing home, I believe it's on the west side. And as you know, nursing homes are a problem. So she was tested and she did have COVID. And that was probably about 2 weeks before she passed away. And then on May 1st at 4 o'clock in the morning, she developed a really bad cough and she couldn't breathe. And within 30 minutes, she had passed away. And her service at the graveside was just with the family. That's been done, but there will be a memorial service at a later date. That's all I know right now. And she was 89 years old.
Thank you, Ms. Cheney. And if, typically what we do, typically what we do in these, as well as expressing our sympathies is, we'll send some kind of representation of our sympathy as well. And I will be directing our administration to be doing that. Wanted to also acknowledge that Mr. Van Harn's father-in-law passed away here recently. I think most of you are aware of that and have already expressed your sympathies, and just wanted to publicly acknowledge that as well. He was a veteran and our understanding, an outstanding citizen in service to our country.
Thank you.
Welcome. I have a couple of discussion topics, and these will be, we'll go into some more detail. Both Mr. Hirth will speak on this, as well as our solicitor. The first has to do with plans for council and committee meetings moving forward. And I'm going to, when we get to the solicitor's report, we'll talk some more about different ideas about how to do this as we try to phase back into some more normal operations, and how we deal with this idea of people coming in person to council meetings. The other is that I want to increase our group intelligence on how all this may, the COVID-19 situation may affect our local budget moving forward, not just this year, but next. I'm a big fan of visual graphs and pie charts when it comes to understanding budgets and budget comparisons. So I'm directing our administration to begin preparing these type of visualizations for us over the summer and moving forward, as we talk about the vulnerabilities we have to the current services and any potential future services we provide our residents. So I'll ask all the council members and anyone listening really here to think about what you would like to understand about our budget, and let me know, and we'll work on getting a visual representation of that moving forward. And with that, I'm going to close my report and ask for our administrator, Mr. Hirth, for his report.
Okay, as I always lead off these days, the Sober Road project continues. The great news is curbs and sidewalks are now being removed in the middle of the project, and we have resolved any sidewalk repair issues that we had from our mailing to residents who were in need of repairing portions of sidewalk. So everything at this point is in place. The project will end probably sometime 1st of July, mid-July, mostly because of some of the weather delays. And the weather's been horrible lately. And they've also had some issues with staffing their crews because of the issues that we've been dealing with health. On Bremont Avenue near Losantiville, which Mr. Marks is very familiar with, we saw a positive outcome expected from passing ordinance 2020-6 at the last council meeting. And that was an ordinance amending chapter 902 of the Code of Ordinances. The best way to call it, the mess that MSD left there, was actually repaired to the specifications of the ordinance. So I've spent the last week notifying utility companies what their responsibilities are in terms of applications, street opening fees, and bonding. I'm getting pushback from a couple of them, which I'll discuss with Mr. Donnell, and I'm we'll just need to talk about that. So that was a good thing to see. Also, that obnoxious plate that's been on Lasanaville for the last 6 months is now gone at Elbrook. And that was also when we started throwing the possibility of daily fines at them, they were quick to get it moved. So that was really good work by everybody. We continue to monitor advisories from Rita and the Hamilton County Auditor on revenue projections. We're working on how to avoid deficits, and we'll provide an in-depth discussion of this at the next council meeting. I think there will be some discussion this evening about whether or not to hold a finance meeting prior to that meeting. So we'll let that happen. As an announcement here, we still need volunteers to plant landscaping on June 5th, 2020 from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. That's in place of the Deloitte event that has been canceled for this year. So as you see volunteers, please engage people and let me know if you have anyone who can help. Actually, if all of you could help, bring your shovels and spades and let's plant flowers. Census 2020 yard signs have arrived. We have about 50 that need to be placed around the village with permission. So we can't just stick these in people's yards, nor can we put them in the right of way. So if you have neighbors who would be willing to put a census sign in their yard, particularly people who live on a great corner, Lou, we would also appreciate if council members could put these in their yards. If you could let me know, we can drop them off to you. Whatever quantity you need, just email me and let me know. We'll be following responsible Ohio restart directives, and I'm going to bring this up for you. So this is a nice piece that was sent out by the state of Ohio. In general office environments, which are areas that are relevant to the operations at Golf Manor, includes a number of things that we will be asking of people who come into our building. That would include all persons entering must do a temperature scan and then sign a log that they do not have a temperature. We don't want to know what your temperature is, but we just want to know that your temperature is less than 99 degrees. We will continue to triage issues at the door to the south parking lot. That has worked out well. We don't have that many visitors during this time period, and when people knock on the door, Anna is usually there with her face mask to figure out what needs to be done, and then it gets passed on to the rest of the staff so we can help people while they're there. Masks are to be worn by visitors and employees to enter the building. So the usually 3 or 4 of us that are in the administration area, we don't wear masks during the day. We do observe physical distancing. However, if there are people in our building, such as service people, people who are doing repairs, we have to wear masks, along with asking those people to wear a mask when they're in the building also. We're doing 6-foot distancing between individuals, and that will be also something we'll need to consider when we go back to physical council meetings. So most likely we will be doing those in the hall to be able to get that kind of space. And then on this flyer that you see, this was passed out to all businesses. The things that are on there are things that we're addressing. I sent that all to you today on a PDF if you want to print it out and look at it or just review it. But it's a good guideline for people who are opening up in the state of Ohio. Couple of things I want to point out that are actually on the website. If you go to the homepage blog, and hang on just a second. There's one that came out from Hamilton County on May 8th, which I believe was last Friday. Denise Driehaus and the Cincinnati Enquirer did a great in-depth article on the provisions of the $10,000 grant that Hamilton County could provide for small businesses. So if you know of anybody that is interested in that information, as the mayor had spoken about earlier, We are posting things there so people can quickly find them. The other thing that I would note, which would have been in Chief Campbell's report, the second article on the blog, which we posted on May 8th, is Light Ohio Blue, which is in honor of law enforcement. That's being observed from May 8th to the 18th. So what they're asking is if you will put blue lights on your porches or on your exterior lights, or put a blue light in the window to show that you support law enforcement in the village of Gulf Manor. And aside to that is, let me pull this up, hang on. Rabbi Alt contacted Chief Campbell and I this past week. They are providing a couple of yard signs to put in front of the police building to show the synagogue's support of our law enforcement officers in the village of Gulf Manor. So I thought that was a nice touch. Let's see. Another announcement is remember that offices in the village will be closed on Monday, May 25th, in observance of Memorial Day. And then finally, let me pull up the mayor's court report, which just disappeared. Here we go. Bear with me. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. Come on. Well, for some reason, this won't post. So, for the mayor's court report for the month of April 2020, the total to the village of Gulf Manor was $377 even. Total to the state of Ohio was $95. Total to other was $3. Total revenue received from mayor's court in April 2020 was $475 even. We would need council to accept that report.
Motion to accept the mayor's court report.
I'll second.
All right. And for before I ask for all those in favor, just noting that mayor's court will be officially reopening June 1st. So that's part of the preparations that have also been going into places to prepare for the municipal building to be able to handle that. All those in favor of accepting the mayor's court?
Aye.
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 Without objection,
One-
I'll take
Sorry.
as you.
Okay, one final thing that I would mention, the third article on the blog on the homepage right now states that Gulf Manor recycled and composted 134 tons of recycled material in 2019. And that was a number up for us. We're actually having a discussion, I believe, next week with the recycling folks. So we'll have probably at the next meeting some additional details about our conversion rate and other information for council. And that was a long report. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Hirth. Real briefly, before I go to Mr. Lanzer, the general office requirement stuff for reopening, that PDF that was shown. When I was referring to the PDFs, that's what I was referring to. They also have one for, so that was the one for the office environments. They also have them for consumer and retail services and for manufacturing, distribution, and construction. These are not automatically sent to business owners. All right, they have to know to look for it. They have to know to pursue it. And that's part of why I was emphasizing, if you know businesses and have contact information, please let us know, because we want to push that information out to folks. Thank you again for your report, Mr. Hirth. And Mr. Lanzer, our fiscal officer, may we have your
Not too
report?
much, yeah, not too much to report this evening. As Mr. Hirth said, we continue to monitor advisories from the Regional Income Tax Authority, the state auditor, and the Hamilton County auditor in regards to revenue projections. This week, we reached out to RITA, the Regional Income Tax Authority, to see if we can get updated forecasts for income tax receipts for next year, as we're getting close to tax budget time. Waiting to hear a response from them on that. I expect to be receiving it within the next week or so, updated property tax forecast, revenue forecasts for next year from the Hamilton County auditor. The April finance report has been completed and is saved to the, or it has been made available on the website. I also have made it, emailed each council member to review it. I will have a full report on that at the next council meeting. As an aside to fiscal operations, I also wanted to make council aware, as well as the residents, that we are going to begin using the service department, our service department employees, to aid in property maintenance management in the village. So you'll be seeing them probably out helping, aiding us, ensuring that basic property maintenance requirements of the village are being maintained. End of report.
Thank you, Mr. Lanzer. And could you please do a second poll for quorum?
Mr. Betcher,
Here.
Ms. Cheney,
Here.
Mr. Knipp, Mr. Marks,
Here.
Mr. Priedenoff,
Here.
Mr. Van Harn.
Here.
All members present except for Mr. Knipp.
Thank you. Our solicitor, Mr. Donnellan, would you please provide your report?
Thank you. Did you get what you needed, Andy, as far as accepting your reports? Motion to approve and accept?
We do not have to accept this report. What we need to accept are the monthly financial reports. And I anticipate at the next council meeting, we will be discussing and hopefully accepting the monthly financial reports from February, March, and April.
Good, thank you. We have no legislation for this evening. Hold your applause. Coming attractions. We have been asked, what I call communities, to pass a resolution reaffirming the local government fund. We do this periodically, and that'll be on the agenda for our next meeting. It's a matter of form that all communities must reaffirm that local government fund, which hopefully will be used very shortly here to distribute funds to all communities as it comes from the federal government to the state. Also, we'll be coming quickly into budget season. Mr. Lanzer and Mr. Hirth will be preparing the budget. We have to have a public hearing on the budget, and then we have to pass our resolution, have it down to the county budget commission. That'll be June and July timeframe. You saw on the Responsible Ohio flyer, there's nothing in there at this time relative to public meetings, public hearings. There's no specific guidance to us other than the strict guidance again of, no more than 10 people to be gathered and stay 6 feet apart. As you can see from just the screen tonight, we're at 9 with one of our members being absent. So that's something we're gonna have to look at coming into June in terms of if we try to resume council meetings, is the guideline being lifted? Is the guideline being extended? As Mr. Hirth said, perhaps holding those meetings in the larger hall where we can keep people 6 feet apart. We'll keep monitoring that. I think as we're opening up private enterprise, they're going to revisit what is required of public entities like ourselves in terms of hearings and meetings. So hopefully we'll get some guidance maybe by the end of the month. On that note, I was contacted by Judge Hartman, who, if you remember, during the process of going through the NDO, was providing some legal assistance to Rabbi Matzen. He called me about the process that we went through 2 meetings ago, where we set our public hearing on July 13th, 14th, 13th, expressing a concern because the election cycle, petitions like this have to be to the Board of Elections by August 5th, and wanting to make sure that if we did vote to refer this to the November ballot, there would be adequate time between the time we take that vote and the time the ballot is certified. So if there is any objection or protest, there's adequate time there. What I assured him from our discussion 2 meetings ago was we realize that we have a public hearing requirement by charter, and then we have a requirement that council make the final decision. And the sense that I had from council was you'll probably follow that public hearing up immediately with the council meeting to make your decision on referring it or revoking the ordinance, which would leave almost a month to the August 5th deadline to take action. So as we get closer to that, we'll need to make sure we consider what time and when would that public council meeting be. I also assured him from our conversation that we moved this to July because of that responsible Ohio, responsible restart, and what we can or cannot do relative to public hearings, and a desire to make sure that people had adequate opportunity to come to the hearing and address the petition before council makes its decision. What I told him was my sense is that if we find some guidance from the governor quickly on what we're able to do with public hearings, the council may even consider moving that forward into June. I think I pointed out that Mr. Marks raised the question at our meeting, what is the advance notice requirement to petitioners? Do we have to give 30 days in advance or 7 days in advance? I told him no. So if we get into our meeting schedule in June and we find that things are freed up, we may look at moving that hearing forward, again, to give adequate time for both sides to present their case to the Board of Elections. So I told them, stay tuned, we'll let them know about that. The mayor mentioned what we will be doing or what we can do on public meetings. Right now, we're able to do this, which is video conferencing or telephone conferencing. We're not supposed to hold these sessions if more than 10 people would be present. So some of the communities are looking to maybe a hybrid model. And that is if we still have the governor's order allowing video conferencing or telephone meetings, that maybe would have a hybrid model where we would open up Village Hall for a few people to attend the meeting, have some members attend by phone or video, some members attend live. Because again, if everybody's there and the mayor and me and Mr. Hurth and Mr. Lanzer, we shut out anybody else attending. So we're going to look at, does it make sense to hold some type of a hybrid meeting if we get into June and we're still under these restrictions? That's all I have, unless there are some questions or follow-up.
Terry, that whole question around our meeting in July, and the timing, how does Elaine Moskovitz challenge fit into all that?
If we go forward as we are right now, July 13th, and we decided to hold our council meeting immediately following the public hearing. So we start the public hearing at 6, go to council at 7, or at the conclusion of the public hearing, and council then takes its action. If council refers the matter then to the Board of Elections, Ms. Moskovitz has from that next date, 14th, all the way till August 5th, if she wants to bring some type of a challenge. And actually, I think the challenge date may even go farther into August, because August 5th is the filing date for a petition to be presented. And I assured Judge Hartman, we wanted to be balanced on both sides. We didn't want to push this so far back that we kept Ms. Moskovitz from filing a protest if that's what she wants to do. I also assured him that's not our role. We don't take a role in a protest. We don't take a role in determining whether the signatures are sufficient or valid. That's Board of Elections. Our job is just to hold the public hearing and to make a determination of either referring it to the ballot or revoking the ordinance. And I said the reason for the public hearing is our charter, and likely what we would have is allow the petitioners to state their case as to why they want this either revoked or referred to the ballot, allow public comment, and then council make its decision.
Jerry, what if we're not able to have a successful public hearing in July? If we can't figure out this hybrid solution, you know, what would that look like going forward?
I think we have to find a way of doing this in July. There's no prohibition to public hearings. The current legislation right now says if you have a public hearing, those who participate must have the ability to see documents like we've done tonight, and they must have the ability to ask questions if someone gives a presentation. So it's not just council asking questions, it could be audience members also asking questions. Facilitates itself a lot easier if we're able to get together as a group. But I don't think we can say no public hearing because of COVID, because our charter mandating that this go forward to the November ballot, if that's where it's going to go. Other questions?
I wanted to mention to everyone that Cedric Denson, our Ohio House representative, and I have been speaking, and he is very open. If we need or are requesting, we may well see this happen anyway. So as Terry had mentioned, some more clarification coming down from the state through the legislature about how to have hybrid kind of meetings. If we would like to play a role in writing some of that or contributing to some of that legislation, we can certainly, you know, send that message up through him. Well, thank you, Terry. But before I move on to the next section, I did leave something out of my report accidentally that I wanted to speak to that concerns our solicitor here, and that is I learned a little bit more about fines for violating the state orders. They've been set at a maximum of $150 per violation. I think I had mentioned previously that the way that works with the health department is, you know, if we see a violation, the way it initially was occurring was that we would, you know, kind of report it to the health board, and then the health board would come out and deal with it. They've instructed a local law enforcement to assist with that. And they have drafted what citations would look like for our officers to use if enforcing these things locally. And also we're allowed to create our own local orders. So as this thing, you know, evolves through the summer, if we're seeing a need to have our own kind of ordinances with regard to the safety of our residents and our first responders, there's a maximum of $100 fine that we can you know, legislate here locally and enforce locally. So it's $150 one for the state. That's the maximum for the state, and they're saying that they're handling those kind of like tickets. And my understanding is that we're doing that locally as well. We're certainly not, you know, just running out there and citing somebody. We're, you know, making sure that they're aware that we're displeased with the behavior, and if we continue to see it happen, then we're citing. Governor DeWine has indicated that he'll veto any legislation that tries to overturn this aspect of enforcing the restrictions. So I wanted to bring that up, and if you had any comment on it, Mr. Donlin.
Yeah, I think what you're finding most communities doing is the number one order is someone has a crowd of more than 10 people and they're too close together. Most of the police are approaching those crowds and asking them to disperse. And most part people are. If they don't disperse, they have that option of issuing the citation of the Board of Health. The only other areas where we're seeing it are maybe where the playground has been closed off and someone's gone through the barrier and in the playground. Again, when people are asked, very quickly they do disperse. So we probably won't encounter the need to issue a citation to Mayor's Court, but we do have that authority if we need to.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan.
Mayor Dinsmore?
Yes.
I've had a couple residents ask me about the park. I haven't been able to check on what the status of that is or will be, or do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so Mr. Hirth, our village administrator, and I discussed this early on. I had expressed an initial feeling that we should try to keep our parks open as much as possible, especially with people locked in with kids all day and needing to have places to to get out. Very thankful that all the Hamilton County parks are open and in use. It was pointed out to me, though, that our playground, that we had an issue there with maintaining the cleanliness of that of the playground area for the kids, and that there was a consensus that I think we were required through the state to close off the kids' playground area. And the concern was, how do we actually enforce that if the whole park is open down there? We like just wrap yellow tape around it or something, which I guess is an option that maybe we could even reconsider at this point. But I have not, since that previous conversation with our village administrator, broached the topic, other than that the recommendation coming from the administration was, let's close the park. That'll make it easier for our police department to manage that area. But with things reopening, I appreciate the question. I think it's worthy of discussion moving forward.
So Chief Campbell would probably tell you that we normally have a lot of unsupervised children who are in the park. And one of the concerns that we had is if we put tape or some kind of barrier around the play set, it's going to get removed. We have people moving large rocks and those heavy picnic tables around the park all the time. So at that point, it becomes a distraction to our police department to have to enforce that constantly. So our intent was, when the governor lifts the orders to allow that, that the park be open, that's when we'll move forward with that.
The administration and I are both open. If you guys got ideas about how to walk this balancing act, certainly reach out to us with your ideas moving forward. Thank you for the comment. Any others? All right, we've done the police report. Can I ask Mr. Marks to report on the Little Miami Fire District?
Yeah, a couple things. We're going to have a meeting next Wednesday, and it's going to be a live meeting. So we'll actually be meeting in the council chambers over at Fairfax, since there's only maybe 8 or 9 people that normally attend that. They've created the space over there, kind of like we would do in our hall, with tables and keeping everybody spread out. So we'll see how that works next week. We'll have our first shot at how that's going to be.
So Mr. Marks, excuse me, Mr. Marks, I haven't seen any information on that. When did that go out?
I'm just going by what, didn't Carson call you to get your opinion of whether you were willing to attend a live meeting or not?
He did call, but he didn't tell me what the resolution was.
Oh, I didn't have a resolution. I just had a conversation with him, and he said it was going to be in there. It seemed like everybody was okay with having a meeting together, and he has their council meetings set up with large tables. So that's as much as I know about it. And he said something was going to be sent out shortly from Jenny about the meeting.
Great, thank you.
So there's nothing official yet. He just told me that was going to be coming. The run rate is still low. I don't have a report for April. I'll have that at the next meeting, since we'll have a LMFR meeting next week. Also, I mentioned that we were going to be losing some people to St. Bernard, and 2 people have confirmed, both Casey Ballman and Charlie Waghorn will be leaving Little Miami to join St. Bernard. We don't have the timing yet. As many of you know, those are 2 very long-term members of Gulf Manor's fire department. So they're leaving, and these are young people with young families, and this is probably a financial decision. So anyway, I don't, as of the other day, we still don't have a sense of timing from St. Bernard, but we do have a bench to pull in and fill those spots. So Chief Ballman is going to, or Chief Ballman, geez, had that in my head. Chief Putoff is going to begin transitioning the people that we had on our list into the department as these 2 other leave. But we're losing an officer in that one case, so not good, but not unexpected. It's going to be a constant struggle to keep people in the department as these other cities and villages with lots of cash are upping the ante on hourly rates. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. And if you have any ideas of good approach for the mayor to thank them for their service, please let me know your ideas on that. I understand that it's that we may have some sour feelings about it, but we certainly want to make sure that we.
I don't have sour feelings for them. They're making a family decision.
I didn't mean sour feelings towards them. I meant sour feelings for the situation.
Oh, the situation's bad, but you have to, they're going to do what's right for their families, and that's the way it is. So yeah, I'll check with Chief Putoff and let you know.
Thank you. Ms. Cheney, do you have an education report?
I do. LSDMC met this afternoon at 4 o'clock. And as I mentioned last meeting, they were doing a fundraiser to get 250 iPads or whatever they could get. And they came up with $11,000. They got 160 refurbished Chrome notebooks with that money that they're distributing now to the kids that didn't have any. You're going to see 6th grade yard signs appear for PRM students. They're being delivered now. And yeah, well, wait a minute. No, they're not being delivered. They will be delivered at Pleasant Ridge Church for pickup on May 20th at 4 p.m. So hopefully we can allow them to keep that sign in their yard for a little while without it disappearing. And with the budget cuts that DeWine is making, as you've heard, it's going to hit education. CPS is going to be cut $8.7 million out of their budget for next time. The schools may also be asked to cut. It's not finalized right now. They're going to make these decisions by the end of June because it's probably going to affect some of the personnel. And we also decided that the after-school program that YMCA was handling, we're going to go with Cincinnati Recreation, and it'll be out of the Pleasant Ridge Rec Center. So they'll do the after-school program next year if it ever starts again, or when it starts again. And then the only other thing CPS, the board presented 2 options to add on to Pleasant Ridge School. The first option would be to add 4 or 5 classrooms above the offices and the media center, which is on the far right of the building. And then the other option would be a 3-story addition, which would add 5 to 8 classrooms on the opposite side, which they would have to relocate the playground for too. This LSDMC wasn't sure that this would really be a good option because Pleasant Ridge is growing and the whole area is growing. Gulf Manor is growing, Kennedy Heights is growing, and there's a lot of young kids that are coming in that aren't 5 years old yet. So we decided that we would write a letter to Laura Mitchell let her know that this is a great option to fix the problem for now, but what about the future? So that's where we're at with that. And then another thing that I like to add is outside of education is that I like to give kudos to Mr. Hirth, Mr. Lanzer, and our department heads. Being on council for so many years, I've been on when we went $200,000 in the hole. This happened before the first time I came on council in the 90s. So I want to give them kudos because they're on top of what's going on right now and they've adjusted the budget. They've worked with the auditor and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it before we fall in the hole again. So thank you. And that's all I have.
You're here.
Thank you. Yeah, here. Thank you, Ms. Cheney. I know that we have been asked by the principal of Pleasant Ridge Montessori, and I know there was council members in Amberley Village that had mentioned kind of collaborating in this in terms of having mayors and council members writing a letter, kind of echoing what the letter from the LSDMC is saying. And do you have any updates on that? Because we certainly, I would certainly like to support what our LSDMC is requesting.
Okay, I can mention that to Peg Conway. She's our chair, and see where she wants to go from there.
I appreciate it. Let me know.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we have any, I'm not seeing anybody else listed. I know that sometimes we'll have a finance report even to say that the finance committee did not meet. Mr. Betcher, did you want to report?
Nothing to report at this time.
Okay.
If I may, Mr.
Just one moment, Roger. I wanted to
Okay.
ask if our executive committee chair, Mr. I'm sorry, Mr. Marks wanted to give any report. That guy. Yeah.
I do not have anything necessarily, but one thing I heard about, and I don't know, maybe Andy or Ron may be more tuned in, but there, I know as part of this COVID thing, and we're talking about finances of the village and how it impacts people. One thing that was put on hold, and maybe Terry knows more detail, but was the subject of people who have lost their income. And I guess they sort of were not allowing evictions to take place for rental property over a brief period. Apparently that could be coming to an end pretty soon. Now, I don't know what pretty soon means, but you know, there might not be an extended period of allowing people to not pay rent without evictions. And so the one thing they brought up was city of Cincinnati could be severely impacted by anything there because as of some of the data that's there, they're like 62% rental property now because of all the number of rental properties in the bill. And I remember that report we had a few months ago showed that Gulf Manor was slightly over 50% in rental property as far as number of residents. So if there's something that could impact individuals in Gulf Manor, they were cautioning that if you have a high number of rental properties, at least your population, and your population is in the lower end of the income bracket, you could be seeing some people really get upended if this something happens to where they start saying, okay, you can start moving forward with evictions with people that are not paying rent. So Terry, you're sort of shaking your head a little. You may have heard something.
Yeah, as part of the governor's order back in March, evictions were put on hold until 1st of July.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean people get a free stay without paying the rent. That just means that a landlord cannot force someone out by taking court action until July. So the expectation is, unless this is extended, there's going to be an explosion of eviction actions and potentially foreclosure actions in the court. The article in this morning's paper talked about it on both sides. that the landlord still has to pay for the property taxes coming up in June. Still has to pay to maintain the building. So the landlord is very anxious to collect the rent, and people are negatively impacted. So the priority is going to be when the evictions come back on. I think Mr. Landsman at Cincinnati is working on this, is to kind of do a triage of what deserves, top priority in hearings. And that would be if there's criminal activity, drug activity, things like that, where you really do want to get somebody out of a building. They're going to make that a priority and try to then triage down that list to, the mother and with 2 kids who has lost her job. But it's a very delicate balance. Again, the landlord needs some money to maintain the property. The property tenant can't afford to pay it. So right now there's just kind of this moratorium, but that's only about another 6 weeks.
Yeah, and that's what they were cautioning, and we fit right into that. I mean, we're staring down the barrel of that gun with our number of people that are low income and the amount of people that are residents that are paying rent. So that could really be impactful to some of our neighbors.
If I may, Mr. Donaldson, I'm trying to figure it out, is there a relation to a landlord in some of the potential government small business programs? Or I know it's kind of a sketchy thing, and is there anything connection to that, or they kind of independent of each other in that respect?
In my business.
Yeah, I don't know where the landlords as an entity, a business entity, fit into like the Hamilton County program. I don't know what federal program there might be there for small business other than maintaining employment for landlords. But it is a real problem that is going to have to be addressed sooner than later, because we can't flood the courts suddenly with evictions and foreclosures, and we can't be putting people out on the street and increasing the homeless population. Then again, if you're the investor and owner, you can't afford to give your rent away for free. So that's one of those, stay tuned and let's see what happens, but we have no control over. That control is at the state level and in the court level.
Sorry, I was more bringing it up
Thank you.
from an executive standpoint because I mean, Cincinnati could really get walloped, but Gulf Manor is sitting right there with that. So again, nothing we control, nothing we can do, but there's some property owners that may be getting really antsy about losing several months of rent. So.
Lou, there's contacts that I have at the county level that can help you and I get greater clarity around that question that was raised with regard to a landlord as a business entity and the availability of small business loans to them. And if we can get a clear statement from, like, perhaps ideally written up from the county that we could give out to our local landlords, would serve both as a way of helping gather a list of who are, because we also struggle with sometimes not having all that contact information with all our landlords. That's been a priority of I know of the executive committee to start building that kind of contact list with our landlords. And this may be a vehicle for that that has mutual benefit for the landlords, potentially getting some assistance with this that would then also help, not be putting people out on the need to be putting people out of those buildings. So
Okay, that's all I had.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Marks. Mr. Van Harn, did you have a report that you wanted to give?
I just wanted to say we were circling back around the financial stuff. Last meeting, I said I wanted to review the financial packets. I talked to Andy about that just so before I felt comfortable voting on it or approving them later. I did a fair amount of review, and the best thing is I didn't find anything questionable, but I have questions, but I'm going to deal with that with Andy. It's really more about understanding than anything else. So I wanted to let you know I was doing that because I mentioned that at the last meeting. So.
Okay. I appreciate that, Mr. Van Harn, and please reach out to me as well and let me know the concerns that you had, and as I had mentioned in my report, I'm really looking to increase our group intelligence on understanding the budget, because there's going to be a lot of complicated things going on moving forward here that I feel that we all should have a better understanding of. And my sense of it is that if we can get these into graphs, pie charts, these kind of things. So I would appreciate if you would let me know specifically what, even if they're resolved concerns, what the concerns were, so that we can, so I can give guidance to our fiscal officer and to the administration about the kinds of visualizations that may be helpful for our council and for our community.
Yeah, let me assure you, it wasn't really that concerned is probably too strong a word, except for my own understanding. I'm just trying to see how everything fits together is all. So
right. Let me restate that because I didn't mean it in terms of like you were saying, that kind of concern. The concern of not understanding something is what I meant. All right. This stuff is complicated. I struggle with understanding it. And so I want more feedback from all of you about what you struggle with understanding, because I think it's well documented that visualizations help with understanding things. And I want to be able to give guidance on that isn't just coming from nowhere, but that's actually coming from folks in terms of what they're having difficulty understanding. So I'd appreciate your feedback. Thank you. And I will ask Mr. Lanzer if there has been any comments that have shown up in our chat section.
Checking now. No.
There
Okay.
actually is no one in the room with us. No one has been in.
Right. So I would, if there were people on the line, I would ask at this time if there were any questions from the people who have called in. And as we've been notified, there are not. So with that, does anybody else have any desire to speak before I ask for a motion to close? Okay. I'm not hearing anybody, so do I have a motion to close?
Motion to adjourn.
second.
Second.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to ask.
All in favor.
All in favor.
Aye.
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 Without objection, I take that as unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for your participation tonight, and have a great evening.